Okay, we're doing this. Hi, I'm Olin, and I'm a producer, vocalist, songwriter, and live act based in Philadelphia now. I live in Philly. I just moved here pretty recently, back in January with my partner after we did a pretty fat tour. I've been wanting to post videos to this channel for a while. I feel like a lot of social media for artists in general, but especially for musicians, has gotten to a really weird place where we're all being pushed to make the same type of content that doesn't really allow you to have more nuanced conversations. And I feel like the mediums that do have that are super short form, like Threads or Twitter, and a lot of things can get misconstrued over text. So I feel like this is a place where I can articulate my thoughts better and hopefully have more meaningful conversations with people that like my music and want to get to know me better. And hopefully just give other people more insight, not just into my own process, but how musicians might be dealing with things, and to, I don't know, maybe see us as normal people. On that note, I figured to start this channel, I could just ask my Instagram followers some questions that they might have about anything, really, and hopefully I could answer in more detailed responses. I noticed that a lot of them were the same or could be grouped into easy answers. So I think let's just do that. Lewis asked, how have you been recently? On a grander scale, I think being an American right now feels absurd and disorienting. On a much more personal level, I'd say that I'm feeling the best I possibly could, and the feelings that I am dealing with are not unfamiliar. In fact, I feel more equipped now than I did before. Last summer, my girlfriend and I went on tour with Odessa. I parted ways with my old team, finally left the label deal that I was in, so it was a lot of big shifts at once. But I think it was absolutely necessary for me to be able to truly question why I actually enjoy making art and who I'm doing it for. Moving to Philly has been incredible for that too. Being able to control my environment a bit more, being able to spend more time in communities that share the same interests has been incredible for my well-being. I don't get to do it often, but it's meaningful nonetheless. I'm still getting used to the noise and cold, but I think that's just gonna get better over time. I've also gone completely sober. I was not drinking alcohol for a little over a year now, but in January I decided to quit smoking trees as well. And if you know me, you can probably understand how that's a big deal. That came with a lot of stress. That was very, very hard on a emotional level. It messed with my sleep. It messed with my ability to just sit with my own thoughts in a way that I've never had to experience, at least in my adult life. But I think now I'm starting to feel somewhat normal again, now that I'm finding a groove in creativity, because it took some time, because I was moving as well. Just getting adjusted and making that decision was hard. I think it'd be hard for anybody. Amy asked where I've been drawing my inspiration from lately. I have a few answers for this, actually. When I first started working on the album, it's safe to say that happened before our bus tour went into full swing. I was reading this book called House of Leaves, and to put it in short, it's about this family that moves into a house that's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. It's supposed to represent sort of a labyrinth, and the author does a really good job of making sure trying to read it feels the same way. It is extremely confusing and disorienting and requires a bit of patience. I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of a chore to read, but it brought me into exploring existentialism and liminal space in a way that I was trying to do with my first album, Contra, but didn't have the insight or understanding or source material to unpack that in a deeper way. In general, I've just been reading a lot more. I used to love it as a kid, but I think as I started learning production, I started leaning more into videos for learning new skills. So now I'm reading a lot more, and that includes books like Endurance by Scott Kelly, At the Existentialist Cafe by Sarah Bakewell, Kusamakura by Natsume Soseki, just to name a few. I like books that make you question your being and your intentions and why you might be pursuing something. If it's not for your own sanity or well-being, is it to serve an illusion that the world around you is giving you? And that's been a lot more fun to explore. Terrifying, of course, but I think it's much more fulfilling to explore that sort of world with this second album, again, in a way that I just didn't know how to do with my first. I've also been revisiting soundtracks for the game Outer Wilds, which was the biggest influence for my first one. Manifold Garden, which is a game inspired by House of Leaves, and then this game called The Cult of the Lamb that is absolutely insane, but the soundtrack for it by Riverboy is so good. It's so incredible and simple at the same time. I love it. If I were to pull from artistic influences, I'd say that this next album leans in towards artists like Cella, Nisaya, and Subtract. And even though I don't think I sing like these people or articulate myself in the same way, Orion Sun and Thames have been very huge vocal influences. I would say Little Dragon too, but that's like so deeply embedded in my subconscious that I can't help it. I just want to be Yukimi. This next round is actually 2 questions that I feel like just feed into each other really well. The first being, would you say you have a specific process when it comes to making your tracks? And the second asks about the steps in my creative workflow evolving over time. Are there any changes that I didn't expect, really? When I first started writing music, I was like 15 or 16 years old, and I would be writing on an acoustic guitar, singing into my phone, and I would upload recordings directly to SoundCloud through that. And that went on until like my first year of college. I was in bands and I was writing in Cakewalk to sort of articulate my thoughts better, but it wasn't until I started learning about electronic music that I switched to Ableton. And I want to say that was in like 2012. That's my best guess. It took me quite a while to actually understand the discipline of finishing music once production came into the picture. It's very different than just writing a song on your guitar. But I noticed as I was getting closer to this point, I would start songs with drums and bass and then try to write lyrics over that if I didn't have them already. But then I would find myself quitting on ideas because I couldn't come up with a lot of melodic structure to fill out the song in a meaningful way. And it would make me give up on ideas, which is such a bummer. I would also hyper focus on a group of songs or a single. Even if I was working on an entire project like my first album, this was huge, where I completely gave all of my being to finishing that one specific thing or this one specific song for a really long time. And I would overwork myself, I would wear out my ears, and then not enjoy the music anymore or not understand its value to me anymore until much later, once I've had some time away from it. And again, it created a lot of resentment and frustration in the music, especially when I wasn't putting nearly as much time into the visual aspect as well. I think in the last maybe 2 years, it's safe to say that I've taken a new approach where I work on a lot of music at once and I try to keep the time that I spend with it pretty short. So now I usually spend maybe around 2 to 3 weeks on a song if it's a single. And then for my album, I just work in phases where I wrote about 20 songs in December, where I would do a song a day at best if I could. And then my girlfriend and I sat and picked our favorite ones. I've cut even more down since then, so now I'm down to like 13. And then from there, just working on polishing, because I already picked the ones that feel really good or feel the most complete, or a combination of those things, where they still might need work, but it's not the same interactions like I was doing before. I'm just chasing after an emotion and trying to finish the idea as efficiently as possible. If I try to worry about anything beyond that, I'll lose the plot, and that includes like worrying about where things are gonna go. I think not being stuck in a label deal now has also significantly helped with that. Not having to worry about how people are going to perceive what I'm doing, or how it's going to be marketed, how it's going to fit into a world that's already extremely saturated. Not having to worry about any of that is an extremely liberating feeling. Even though there's labels that I could send the music to, I don't want to make that decision out of a fear of not being relevant or not having money or like my career being pushed forward. I think taking that approach before caused me a lot of emotional distress and resentment and put me into environments that made me feel unsafe or uncomfortable. And so now I'm just like kind of debating on whether or not I want to self-release so that I can just keep full control over what my identity gets to be, and or at least I know that once you put out songs that it belongs to everyone else, but I just want more control over what I put out in the first place and what I get to express. I want more control over how people get to experience the music. I finally get to have a say in what is being released and when, and not having this pressure of doing things for the sake of relevancy or trying to keep my numbers up. I just get to make art because I care about it and want to, and it makes me feel good. And if people want to engage in that, that's great. But it's not why I'm doing anything anymore. It's not for the sake of financial stability, because it is easy to get trapped in that, especially once you start to succeed. This dog barking is going to drive me insane. All right, this is a hefty one. Touring puts you in debt. Are you able to talk about that and how it confines you? This is in regards to a thread that I posted a while back, responding to James Blake, airing out the fact that none of us are making money. I don't think I need to go into too much specific detail. I can be pretty general, and I think most people will understand what I'm saying. I guess to start, I think a lot of people have a skewed perception of what artists make in regards to their success. I think a lot of people assume that because you're playing a door spot at a stadium tour, that means that you can afford the stadium. That's not to say that we don't get paid a pretty insane fee at times for the kind of work we're doing. It's just that in order to get there in the first place, it comes with some expenses that hurt. When I first started touring, it was mainly for like label showcases. Those would be great because they covered hotel and ground a lot of the time. And then you just have to be coming out of pocket for your flight. And then it just depended on where you were going. Sometimes that was very easy. It was not so easy when I had to do an international flight. For example, Australia, the flight was somewhere around like $4,000. And at the time that was like the max credit limit that I had on any of my cards was $5,000. So I would be having to just destroy my usage percentage in order to get to this show. And there have been plenty of times where I've just turned down an offer altogether because I didn't want to put myself in that situation, especially if it wasn't clear if I was going to break even from playing the show in the first place. When you're doing support tours, it's even harder because a lot of the time your hotel and ground transportation aren't covered, the flight's not covered. You're just getting like a flat fee, and I don't think this is the headliner's fault. Agencies give you a baseline minimum rate that you can pay people out for openers, and it's usually why a lot of people will like go to locals before they resort to being able to like flying people out. That's it. It's a lot. It's a lot. That's not including any crew members or anything. All of those have to be accounted for. Again, I don't think that's a headliner issue. I think that's just a state of where things are at the moment, where you kind of have to fight a bit to get a better fee, and that fee also depends on the kind of time slot that you're playing. So naturally, someone who's doing direct support might have larger stage production and actual crew that they have to pay for. You're gonna get a better rate for that because you have to pay for that. Someone has to, at least. Something that adds another layer of difficulty to this is playing live. That's something that I've preferred to do. It's something I've done for most of my life. I only really started getting into DJing because it seemed like the easiest way to be able to tour consistently and be able to play your own music without the expense of playing live. When I carry my gear and I have to fly, I'll usually end up getting a more expensive flight to make sure I don't have any connecting flights. It's less risk for anything to get lost when I'm checking. The actual process of carrying the gear around, usually by myself, it can be really stressful. On top of having to get bigger Ubers and therefore like more expensive Ubers because you're carrying all that gear. These things might not seem like a big deal in hindsight, but it just adds up over time. I have been lucky to be able to at least break even usually when I do these live tours. The most recent one, that wasn't the case, but it was mainly because we had to grab a lot of extra gear that I didn't have before. I bought a redundancy system so that we could use 2 computers at once for the show. I got a case to hold all of our electronic equipment so that it was safe underneath the bus because we were on a bus tour. Little things like that. I mean, I guess they're not little, but it's things like that that help give you peace of mind. They cost more money. It's like you have to pay more money for comfort and for relief, especially as you start incorporating more elements to make your show more special to begin with. All of this hasn't stopped me necessarily from playing shows. If I want to do a show and I feel it in my heart that it needs to be done, that it's going to give me a good experience, then I just kind of eat it and just go with it. And I don't have regrets about that either. I'm really happy with the show experiences that I've had in the past. Even if it's been a struggle or a really stressful time in my life, looking back on it, it's all experience. Even the worst aspects of my touring or music industry experience just shows me more of what I don't want so that I can work towards what I do. To wrap it all up, I guess I could say there's a lot of factors that people don't consider. I think they assume that artists are getting paid a lot. This job does not come with health insurance. You do this because you love it and you care about it and you want to connect with people. That's what I said in the thread, and I truly mean that. You do this because you care deeply about the connections you're able to establish outside of your studio. It's a whole different world than just releasing music. It gives you context. And that in itself is why I like to tour, even though, let's be honest, it's not even just a musician thing. Traveling, trying to take care of yourself, trying to get food, as an American right now, it's just more expensive. And I think that speaks to a much broader issue than just artists being able to sustain themselves. I think a lot of people living in Western society right now are struggling to sustain themselves, and that's all I'm gonna say on that. I haven't booked any shows outside of what's going on next week. I'm playing in San Francisco with Andrew Pralov, who's the composer of the game Outer Wilds. He's got a whole orchestra going and he'll be playing songs from the soundtrack. I'll be playing out some new songs from the album along with old favorites. But other than that, I haven't booked my tour yet. I figured I wanted to make sure I had plenty of music to sustain me, I guess, or to just feel like I put in the work for the year. And again, it's just kind of time to put together visuals, think about a path moving forward, how much I want to include other people in that process, because I truthfully don't know yet. And that's been a weird place to be, but it feels honest and I get to move at my pace. And if I'm being for real, these feelings aren't new at all. I was feeling just as confused and scared of the unknown when I had a team and a label. If anything, I felt worse then because I was trying to fit in to narratives that I didn't quite understand or even know if I wanted for myself to begin with. But I guess that's what's scary about being a musician in general. It's a lot of unknowns. You have to just learn how to cope with the unknowns. Now that I think about it, that's the case for everybody, huh? Anyways, I guess that's a good place to stop. If you want to keep up with any videos I put out in the future, you can subscribe, you can like this video. If you want to get merch or vinyl, I have a website, and you can get tickets to my San Francisco show next week with Andrew Pralov at the Regency Ballroom in San Francisco. I don't know if I said that already, but if I don't see you there, I'll see you in the next video.